I want to share a quick story with you. 5 years ago, on April 4th, 2016, I ate an alligator. Odd start, right? Let's put a pin in that. I'll get back to it soon because my Tulane story actually begins a lot earlier than that. I'm from a pretty small town. So small, it's technically only a census-designated place. We don't have a Target, we don't have any malls, and we don't have many options for takeout. But it's cozy and familiar. Those of you who know me might describe me as an enthusiastic, talkative, and occasionally annoying guy with crazy hair who right now is keeping a story involving an alligator from you. But sometimes that enthusiasm can be a facade. In truth, I can get nervous about unfamiliar things. I never knew what it meant to really challenge myself, to take the chance that I might not be good at something or like it. So when it came to choosing a college, I had to make the choice, just like all of us in this virtual room, that would affect the rest of my life. I could have gone to a giant public school, but I was nervous about getting lost in the crowd. Alternatively, I could have gone to a tiny private school, and like my hometown, census-designated place, it would have felt familiar and safe. But I realized that going to a tiny school could hold me back from getting to experience new things, meet new people, and really challenge myself. My heart was heavy with the emotion of making the right decision, but I followed my gut and chose the school that was perhaps the least familiar feeling to me. Tulane is the last place you'd ever think a secretly insecure kid from a small town would choose to spend 4 years in college, and then stay for another year to get his master's during a pandemic because he couldn't get enough. For all the family and friends who are watching who haven't had the chance to visit, New Orleans is a remarkable place. My dad says people here are even nicer to you than Disneyland employees, but they're actually being genuine. They're not reading a script, they're just being themselves. And they expect you to be just as genuine back. It's a city that revels in the individuality of every street, every building, every person. And because of that, it's one of the weirdest, quirkiest, and liveliest places you'll ever visit. When I visited Tulane in high school, I committed nearly on the spot. Later that night, my parents took me to a fancy restaurant to celebrate my decision. That's where things really changed. Sitting there, I realized that I had leaped completely out of every single thing I knew to be familiar, and I decided to venture even further out of my comfort zone. I ordered the alligator bolognese. Up till then, mind you, the wildest thing I'd ever eaten was the hillbilly burger back home, which isn't any more exotic than a hot dog and tater tots on a burger. And there, sitting in front of me, was a steaming plate of alligator. But I stuck my fork in and took a mouthful, and boy, was it delicious. Now, I know that my first experience eating alligator may seem unimpressive after we've all gobbled countless pounds of crawfish over the years, but as you think about your time at Tulane, try to remember the first time you faced your alligator. Maybe it was when you were choosing your first roommate, or your first time walking into Sharp. Maybe it was your first time at Bruff and you didn't know who you should sit with. Maybe it was your first time chanting the hullabaloo and you couldn't quite remember the words. Maybe it was your first exam. Or maybe it was just figuring out how to cram your last floppy dollar into the machine on the streetcar returning from Muses. Whatever yours was, you conquered it. And you've conquered countless other gators since then. What have those alligators taught you? What have you learned here that you never would have learned at another school? As we're about to begin this next chapter in our lives, I hope you'll take time to think about the changes that you're going to make in the world. I hope you seek out challenges that help you better yourself and those around you. I hope you strive to learn new things, to be good leaders, but also recognize good leaders and follow them. And finally, I urge each and every one of you to remember everything this wonderful school and fantastic city have taught us. And when life hands you an alligator, take a bite.
What a wild year and a half this has been. I'm sure most of us can agree that we had a slightly different idea of how our last year in school would be. As I was reflecting back on my life and everything that has happened to bring me to this moment, it made me realize just how true the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus was when he said, "The only constant in life is change." And I have found that the older I get, the more I realize just how true this is, and the more empowered I choose to feel by it. Thanks to the Supreme Court changing its stance in Brown v. Board of Education, and the heroic acts of individuals like Ruby Bridges, Pearlie Eloy, and Barbara Guillory Thompson, and Michael Starks, who chose to face change head on and become the first to integrate our secondary schools, Tulane University, and Tulane Law respectively, I have the honor as a Black woman to be able to stand before you today as a fellow member of the Tulane graduating class of 2021. But you could have never told me that this would be my reality, even 5 years ago. I grew up in a middle upper class immigrant family that taught me the value of hard work. As the oldest child, I was the stereotypical perfectionist and overachiever, which served me well and carried me all the way to college, where I earned a full ride to Texas A&M University. Upon graduating, the world was supposed to be my oyster and my options endless, until I found out I was pregnant. At 22, instead of planning my backpacking trip across Europe with friends, I was reading What to Expect When You're Expecting and trying to figure out how I was supposed to bring a new life into this world. By 23, I was a single mom with a 20-month-old and no job at the height of the housing bubble recession. For the next 6 years, I lived below the poverty level while supporting me and my son. So many nights I cried out to God asking, "Why me? What did I do to deserve this? Haven't I been a good and faithful servant?" I didn't understand why life was dealing me this set of cards. But I had a choice. I could accept that this was my fate. After all, while only 11.8% of the population lives in poverty, 39% of families headed by Black single mothers do. But I refused. I had no clue how I was going to dig myself out of these trenches, but I knew that I would spend the rest of my life working to give my son the quality of life he deserved. And I made a promise to myself that my son would grow up believing that he could accomplish whatever he wanted to accomplish in life, because he saw his mama do it first. It took a cross-country move, a lot of sleepless nights, many tears, and thoughts of doubt. But I've stayed true to my promise. 7 short years later, this fall, my son and I will move from being among the 11.8% of people living in poverty to me being an attorney at a leading law firm. Absolutely nothing about this journey has been easy, but every single day of it has been worth it. I would be nowhere without the love and support of my friends, family, and most importantly, my son. Nelson Mandela said that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. Class of 2021, we have been through so much, and yet we stand here today as conquerors. It's okay if you don't know what the future holds. It's okay if life doesn't currently look like what you thought it would. What matters is that you continue to push forward, despite the fear. There is greatness waiting for you on the other side.